To have this opportunity to share with you our plans for growth. Now, this is not the first Chamber of Commerce speech I've made this year, but it's the first time I've addressed the reigning UK Chamber of the Year. So before I go any further, I'd like to congratulate all of you on that. Because it's no exaggeration to say that Labour's ambitions for government, our most important mission, to get Britain building again, grow our way out of the suffocating cost of living crisis, will depend on your future success. And now, before you pulled up that fantastic palatial drive outside, some of you may have travelled here today along the A1. A road that is absolutely critical to doing business in this region, indeed for the whole of the east side of England. But as many of you will know, a little bit further up from here between Morpeth and Ellington, there's a stretch of the A1 that the Prime Minister has recently promised to upgrade. But there's a catch, because he announced he would upgrade it in 2020. When he was Chancellor, just like Theresa May's government did in 2017, and David Cameron did in 2014, just like the Conservative manifesto promised in 2010. And it's a metaphor for how our country's been run for the last 13 years. The cameras get called, the press release is written, all smiles for the photos. And then it's back to Westminster, job done, rinse and repeat. It's a story you see right across Britain. Infrastructure projects, some with billions already committed, businesses planning around them, strategies developed in rooms like this. But the projects and investment get stuck, blocked by objections, consultations, legal challenges, ballooning costs. Delays, until in the end, it's easier just to pack up and move on. We all know about HS2, a project the Conservatives couldn't get built, even at the cost of £400 million per mile. That's the most expensive railway in the world ever. And I'm afraid to say that all the hallmarks of that project, the waste, the stagnation, the short-term sticking plaster politics, an inability to roll our sleeves up and get things done that will actually grow our economy, can be seen right across the country. I mean, right now, the number of businesses going under has soared to its highest level in years. And as you will all appreciate, every single one, a personal tragedy, an ambition, a dream, an investment in a better future, gone. Now, I'm not here today to hit you over the head about this. You can see the country just as clearly as I can. But next week is the King's Speech, and we can already see that it will only bring more of the same. A manifesto for the 14th year of Tory failure, and the starting gun fired on the next general election. A choice between a Conservative Party with no plan for the future, hurtling down the only high-speed project it's ever managed to build, the highway to British decline, or the Labour alternative, a party that understands the potential that lies in regions like this, that has a plan to grow every corner of this country, will work with you to get the North East building again, get our future back with a decade of national renewal. Because, mark my words, Britain needs this King's Speech to kickstart a big build. We need to focus on the real problems that face businesses and communities of this region. That's why a Labour King's Speech would rip up the red tape in our planning system that stops us building the infrastructure you need, would establish a new generation of technical colleges, a plan for the higher skills that you need, and would bring forward a modern industrial strategy, work hand in glove with the private sector, invest in the potential of regions like this, and win the race for the jobs of the future. That is the job of government as I see it. We have to provide the businesses, communities, and people of this nation with the conditions to succeed. A fundamental deal, if you like, that we serve the country while you drive it forward. The Tories can't do this. Rishi Sunak is too weak to stand up to the blockers on his backbenchers, too haunted by the ghosts of conservative imagination to see the country's problems as you see them. So, if you'll indulge me, I want to set out exactly how our plan would benefit your business and grow the economy of this proud region in 3 steps. Step 1, we will get the North East building again. We will take on the blockers that hold a veto over British aspiration. We will build 1.5 million homes right across Britain, with opportunities for first-time buyers here in the North East. New infrastructure to support businesses, families, and communities to grow. Roads, warehouses, grid connections, labs, all built quicker and cheaper. And with that, a prize for your business, a path to a stronger skills base, a happier workforce, more dynamism, more demand, more growth. Let me just give you a couple of examples. The Thames Tunnel in East London, a project with a planning application 30 times longer than the complete works of Shakespeare, 60,000 pages, £800 million worth of taxpayers' money spent without even breaking ground. Or take Sizewell C, a next-generation nuclear power station in Suffolk, a £20 billion project of national importance, vital for British energy, security, and independence. Now, this one had 40,000 pages of its planning application devoted to data on the environment. And yet, it's been held up in the courts on account of a failure to assess the environmental impact. I could go on and on and on. The examples are countless. But as a country, we can't afford to go on, not like this, because the challenges this inertia creates for business and communities like yours, they're enormous. It's why our roads are so congested compared to other countries, why millions are denied the security of home ownership, why you can't take up the opportunity of clean British energy, the cheaper bills that would reduce your cost base and protect us from the whims of tyrants like Putin. And yet, back in the 50s and 60s, we built the backbone of our entire motorway system in less time than it's taken to talk about turning the stretch of the A1 into a dual carriageway. The national grid was completed in about 8 years, less time than it takes some entrepreneurs to get a grid connection today. But you don't even have to go that far back. The last Labour government delivered High Speed 1 on time and under budget. So I've no time for Tory excuses. Politics is about choices. Do you face up to tough decisions or do you duck them? That's always been the test. So if you take only one thing away from here today, let it be this. Wherever we find barriers to British success, we will bulldoze through them. New development corporations, new planning regimes for national infrastructure, consequences for councils that drag their feet, reforms to judicial review, whatever it takes, we will find a way. No stone unturned, no detail overlooked, no fight ducked. Step 2, a new direction for skills, because a future must be trained as well as built. And the generation of young people that sacrificed so much during the pandemic Their potential must be backed. Seriously, the cost of inaction on this cannot be overstated. £120 billion worth of economic output could be lost by 2030 if the needs of businesses are not met. So we will transform our further education system with technical excellence colleges. Colleges that will have a stronger link to their local economies, more connections to local skills improvement plans. Universities, businesses, rooms like this, all around the table and setting the direction. And in doing so, grounding our education system more firmly, not just in young people's aspirations, but also in the pride, the pull on the badge on the shirt, the ambition you feel when building a lasting legacy for your community. So here in the Northeast, for example, it could mean technical excellence colleges that specialise in construction, health and social care, the clean energy revolution we want to see up and down the East Coast, welders in the Tees Valley. I know there's a skills shortage for precision welders here. And I've seen that in the local skills improvement plan that this chamber wrote. And I know you don't want that plan just gathering dust. You want to see it drive the courses delivered in your local FE colleges. And that is exactly what we will guarantee. Because we want to end the years of businesses feeling hopeless about missing skills. Give you the tools to do something about it. You should have more say over how you invest in your workforce. And at the moment, as everybody here knows, the apprenticeship levy simply isn't flexible enough. Your hands are tied, unable to deliver the full breadth of skills that you need. So we'd transform it into a new growth and skills levy, giving you more power over the training your money can buy. But it's not just on you. Government has to step up as well. Too many young people are leaving education without basic skills. Maths, digital skills, communication and teamwork, skills we know every business needs. So Labour would deliver higher standards in our schools, every child taught by expert teachers, a broader curriculum, real-world maths from an early stage, preparing the next generation to make sure that they are ready for work and ready for life. That's what ending the tax breaks on private schools will deliver. Opportunity for all, skills for business, growth for the nation. Finally, step 3, a modern industrial strategy on a statutory footing, free from the whims and wreckage of Westminster, an emblem of our determination to move away from the stand-aside state that fails to set direction. Now, if you go to the government website to find out about their industrial strategy, scratched across the top is one word. I kid you not. Archived. Archived. Doesn't that just tell you everything? They think that Britain's days of high growth are over, but they're not. Labour will get Britain growing again, bring back industrial strategy, provide the institutions, the incentives, and above all, the stability you need to invest in our future. Because in a world as riven with insecurity as ours, with challenges like climate change, technologies like artificial intelligence, scientific advances like gene editing, constantly overturning the economic apple cart, you need a government that gets involved, that rolls up its sleeves, that offers the hand of partnership in pursuit of the national interest, with clear fiscal rules, sound and followed rigorously. A British jobs bonus that will attract new investment to our industrial heartlands, relight the fire of renewal in communities like this, and a new national wealth fund that will stand with business, work together to invest in the crucial infrastructure the North East desperately needs. The battery gigafactories that will protect electric car manufacturing in Sunderland. The hydrogen and carbon capture technology that can provide an industrial future for Teesside. And the ports that can finally handle large industrial parks, so the East Coast can lead the world in offshore wind. This is what the King's Speech should be about, a national mission to get Britain building again and grow our country from the grassroots, because Britain needs a new business model. And you all know changing a business model is hard. But this is our plan, a plan to expand the country's productive capabilities, but at the same time to change who benefits. A Britain where growth comes from regions like this, a Britain where growth serves regions like this, with infrastructure built more quickly, young people's potential backed, the jobs of the future here in your town, the backbone of this country once again powering us forward towards national renewal, a Britain with its future back. Thank you very much.
So Keir Starmer here addressing business leaders. They're laying out effectively Labour's mission, Labour's approach to the economy, says that Britain needs a new business model. Let's have a listen to some of the questions being put to him now. Of course, he's under pressure within his own party for his stance on Israel-Hamas. So let's see whether that comes up.
The Middle East are uppermost in mind. Two Labour council leaders have called on you to resign because of your refusal to call for a ceasefire. The Labour Party seems to be really horribly divided on the Middle East, doesn't it? What are you going to do about that?
Look, I understand why people feel very strongly about this, not just in the Labour Party, I think in all political parties and across the country, because every day we can see the awful suffering going on in Israel and in Gaza. And for me, this isn't about the particular position taken by individuals within the Labour Party. It's about alleviating that suffering. And just at the moment, we desperately need humanitarian aid to get in faster into Gaza. We can see the images of children and innocent civilians dying and suffering in this situation there. I think that the quickest way, the most practical and effective way to get that changed is to have a humanitarian pause and to pile on the pressure to get those trucks in with the aid that is needed, the water, the medicines, the fuel that is desperately, desperately needed. Now, as we speak, Secretary of State Blinken is in Israel, calling for those very things in alignment with what I said just 2 or 3 days ago. So my focus is on alleviating the awful suffering of all of those that are caught up in the situation that's developed over the last few weeks. Whatever the individual positions of members of my party, that is not my focus. My focus is on driving forward to make sure that all of us can take responsibility for ensuring that we do what we can to alleviate that situation. Thank you very much. Catherine, I think you've got a second question.
And at what point might you shift to actually calling for a ceasefire? Would it change? The US President, the UK government said it was time for a ceasefire. And specifically, what would your red lines be? There's been accusations of white phosphorus being used, of collective punishment, of bombing, of safe routes. What are your red lines when it comes to Israel's behaviour?
Well, I set out my position clearly on Tuesday, and what we've seen is the worst terrorist attack on Israel since the Holocaust, and a humanitarian crisis that was already in existence in Gaza, which has claimed far too many innocent lives already. We have to alleviate that. At the moment, the only practical way to do that is with humanitarian pauses. And To say to a sovereign country, when 200 of its civilians are being held hostage, that they must give up their right to self-defense, is not, for me, the correct position. And anyone who's watched the images in the last 2 or 3 days have seen precisely what Hamas is saying about this. So what we have to do is concentrate on the need, concentrate on those innocent individuals who are caught in this, the children, the young people, the civilians in Gaza, those in Israel who subject still to being subject to attacks through rockets. We have to say humanitarian pauses to get that aid in and alleviate the situation. I think our focus should be on those that most desperately need our support and help, not on political voices in our own country. Thank you very much, Catherine. Amanda from Sky News.
Hello, thank you very much. You've come here to the Northeast to talk about your vision for growing the economy, but everything you're saying is still really overshadowed by Labour's divisions over the issue of Gaza, with council leaders calling on you to resign, members of the front bench speaking against the party line. How frustrating is it for you that it is so overshadowed, everything you're trying to do is overshadowed currently by the divisions over Gaza? Do you think it could jeopardise the potential for you to win a majority at the next general election? And if I may, do you agree with your colleague Jess Phillips that British citizens need to be getting out of Gaza more quickly and that the UK government needs to be doing more?
Everything I've just said in the last 15 minutes about growing our economy, working with businesses here to drive our country forward, is something upon which the whole of the Labour Party is completely united. We had our conference just three and a half weeks ago, 18,000 people there, absolute clarity to show that we had a plan, that we were confident, and imploring the country to turn its back on 13 years of decline and go forward with a decade of national renewal. There isn't a single dissent in the Labour Party about any of that. All of what I've just said has been put together after talking to businesses, which I hope will deliver with us on that as we go forward. So there's complete unity on that issue. On the question of Gaza, there is also unity. Whether people are asking for a ceasefire, humanitarian pause, it comes from the same place, which is people, and this is not unique to the Labour Party, across the country, people desperately want to see an alleviation of the situation. That is a human emotion to what we're seeing on our televisions in images and reports every single day. I am not surprised that people are trying to go for any option that they see would alleviate the awful situation. I don't think that should be taken as great division. That is a human emotion. What I've done is share that emotion. When I see children dying, I have 2 children. I know exactly how this goes to the heart. But what I've concentrated on is what is the practical way to alleviate this situation on the ground? What are the US saying? What are other countries in the Middle East saying? Because you can't wish a situation to change, you've got to bring about that change. You can only do that if you work with international partners, if you're all saying the same thing at the same time, and by that means ensuring that if at all possible we can change the situation on the ground. And there are things that can change. We've been calling for weeks now for more trucks to get in with more aid. I'm frustrated that that isn't happening. And I think there's a responsibility for that to change very fast. And I know that's what the US are trying to push on the ground as we speak. So that's my approach to this. But on the question of growing the economy, I've forgotten how many business secretaries in the last 10 years, but every time you knock on the door of a department, it's got a different person sitting behind the desk. That is causing huge, it's politically funny, and you might even think it's to the advantage of the opposition, but it's so bad for our country. It's so bad for our economy. I've talked to no end of investors who say, it's not that I don't have the money to invest here, it's just I'm not investing in the UK right now because it's too short term, it chops and changes all the time, and it doesn't have the strategic stability that I need if I'm going to have the confidence to put my money into projects in this country. That is a very bad place. It's almost not party political for me. I mean, it is this government that's done it, but nobody, whichever party they're in, should want to see a situation like that. And that's why I have been very clear that an incoming Labour government, if we're privileged to serve, and to serve is the way I see it, will be mission-driven. And that's not just a sort of catchphrase. It's intended to say, we will set out in terms 5 missions, 5 things that we will drive at. Economic growth being number 1, by the way, because I think without economic growth, you can't get anything else done. And they will be strategies underpinning a decade of national renewal. And they've got to be strong enough, they've got to be strategic, they've got to be long-term, so that they create the conditions of stability and confidence we need in our economy. Now, in order to make that happen, we have to do a number of things. The first is we need to make sure that you are all comfortable with the missions. Because if we're going to come into government to deliver missions which are long-term, we're going to need you alongside us to work with us. Because I don't believe in sucking everything up to Westminster and Whitehall. I don't think governments run business better than business does. I don't personally believe that the free market on its own achieves everything we want to achieve. So it's going to have to be a partnership between us. I don't feel I can ask you to be a partner with an incoming Labour government if your fingerprints aren't on the missions in the first place. That runs the risk that we come into government. You say, well, I wouldn't have done that as the mission in the first place. So we get that by getting buy-in before we get there. So there's a stability about the project that we're trying to put forward. But it is also a decade of national renewal, which is not me getting ahead of myself. Obviously, it is a 5-year term, but we have to accept that some things are going to take longer than 5 years to fix. And if we just do the quick fix, we won't get there. The NHS you mentioned is a classic example. My wife works in the NHS. I get the daily frustration of this. What happens every year is exactly the same in the NHS. We get to about this time of year, and we will very soon enter a winter crisis. We've had a winter crisis every year for as many years as any of you or any of I can remember. It gets really acute over Christmas and January. And in about January, February, a little bit of money is put in to alleviate the situation, the sticking plaster that gets it through to about April or May. Summer is a bit of relief, and then we go around the same cycle again, the only difference being that the next winter crisis will be worse than the one that went before. We've got to break out of that. And so that's the way that we would do it, but working with you, which is why we're using a lot of the time between now and the election to make sure that we've got it right, that you are having an opportunity to input into what are the conditions of stability that you need to ensure that we can actually do this over a longer term. And finally on this, John, because I think this is one of the single most important issues in politics, the pretense that you can do everything in short bursts and picking up projects, then putting them back down again, is crucifying our economy. Is this sense of, I've said at our conference, what we want is a decade of national renewal. Renewal is really important because that's about not just fixing, but renewing and taking our country forward. The national is important because I want to recognise that there are many people who wouldn't necessarily be tribal Labour, if you like, who would be interested in a national project to renew our country. And therefore, I think it's got to be broad enough. It can't be just badged in the narrow colours of one political party. It's got to be wider than that. So it's an invitation to people to come on this journey with us. And I think they are the conditions that will, I hope, turn around. But John, for me, it's one of the most central issues in politics and economics today. Thank you. I think I've got Lucy Winskill. Lucy.
Sir Keir, can I also welcome you back to the North East? Great to see you. I'm chair of the North East Local Enterprise Partnership. In light of the North East devolution deal and the creation of the larger mayoral combined authority here in the North East, how will the Labour Party ensure the voice of business is heard and continues to play its part in shaping the future strategy for economic growth and prosperity?
Lucy, thank you very much for that. And again, this is a really important question because we've had that devolution to mayors and combined authorities over recent years. But I don't think we've necessarily thought through how that now works. In other words, so we've got the elected officials, we've moved to a different model. Have we conceptualised how does that change things? Now, for me, I want the highest sustained growth in the G7 as the mission number one, grow our economy across the UK. We haven't had any significant growth for the last 13 years. That's a major part of the problem. So we all know we want growth. There's nobody's going to quarrel with wanting growth, it seems to me, in the business community. Then the next question is, what sort of growth? You could say, well, I want a model that growth is driven by this part of the country, and then we redistribute across other parts of the country. I don't want that model of growth. I want this growth to be in every place, driven up, serving the communities that we need. So living standards are lifted. This is about how an economy works well and fairly. It's also about basic respect of working people. Working people want to have a decent, secure, skilled job near where they live, where they work, that they can be proud of. In order to make that happen, I think an incoming Labour government, if we're privileged to get over the line, is going to have to be bold enough to push power, decision-making, and money out to areas, places, so that decisions can be made. And so I would say decisions about the North East are best made by people with skin in the game. I think they will have a better sense of what is needed and how to achieve it than somebody sitting in Whitehall or Westminster. I've got many criticisms of what the government's done with levelling up, because I don't think they've actually done very much levelling up, and that's a whole other debate. But underpinning it is this sense that there's somebody with a pot of money in London who sits and decides what projects may or may not get the money they need. This should be devolved. If it is devolved, we then need a partnership between businesses and mayors or combined authorities. I wouldn't get fixated on the particular hub, actually. I would actually let that be a bit dynamic and work on what has already worked well. But businesses need to be then centrally involved in that, putting their fingerprints on a plan for the area that is then jointly owned, jointly operated. And the role of government is to devolve, to push, to put power where it should be, but retain a framework that means it's done responsibly. And I think there are brilliant examples of how this can be done. And I think that's the way that you power up the economy in the North East or anywhere else across the country. There is no substitute for people who've got skin in the game. You know far better than I do the needs, the workforce, the skills, the drive, the partners for a project here in the North East. There's no point me trying to do that, and I shouldn't, because governments aren't very good at sucking it up to the centre. Our job is to create the conditions that allow you to do that with your local partners. And my experience is where that space is allowed and the power and money is provided to go around it, it works really, really well. It is going to mean some changes. Skills have got to change. We've been arguing about skills for years. It's the same argument round and round again. You need more power over what skills are needed. You know the skills you need better than I do. We need to get our colleges to work together, so not everybody's trying to compete to give the same courses that perhaps make the most money for the college, but don't address the skills gap in the area where they are. There's a lot we can do. And what I want to do is to continue that conversation with you about how we make that work in practice. Thank you, Lucy. And I've got Matt Beaton. Matt.
Thank you. The North East is really well positioned to help achieve your ambitious targets in clean energy, especially with regard to floating offshore wind and offshore wind. And we welcome the commitment to spend 1.8 billion on clean energy ports. My question is, how might ports like the Port of Tyne and the other great ports in the region work with you and your team to deliver that ambitious vision?
Thank you very much, Matt. And we agreed last night that I'm coming to visit you very soon so we can have this conversation on the ground. Look, I think there's a huge opportunity when it comes to clean energy. You would expect me to be very critical of the government because I want to replace them. I think what they're doing on net zero is a huge mistake. I think by downplaying it, by trying to make it into a political football, I actually felt just a few years ago that there was a political consensus about net zero that was just sort of slightly above politics, that we all recognised that, you know, whether you were Conservative, whether you were Labour or any other party, that we all had a shared investment in this. To now change dates, to downgrade it, it will be made a political football for the next general election. You know, don't doubt that. It's a big mistake because whatever the challenge of clean energy, whatever the challenge of net zero, it's the single biggest opportunity we've been handed in generations to get the jobs of the future. America sees this. So the Inflation Reduction Act in America is like a magnet for investment and for jobs. the like of which we haven't seen generated in this country for a very, very long time. So we can't make that mistake, which is why you need a clear mission. What is it you're going to try and achieve? Clean power by 2030. That means I've got to work with you hard. That means that the North East can be the powerhouse so that there's place-based jobs with pride, with security, with the skills of the future. Some countries are going to have to get ahead when it comes to hydrogen. We are brilliantly placed when it comes to offshore wind. You know, with the natural resources that we've got. This coast is incredible. The floating offshore wind is just staggering to even conceive of, and I've been out to see some of the static ones myself. Huge opportunities. That requires government and business to work together. You need to tell me, right, for these ports, what do we need? What's the configuration to get some of the parts in and out in a way that we can't do at the moment? But we've got to have a shared objective, a way of working, and pull together the three questions here, which is long-term and sticking with it when the wind starts blowing across government, working with local businesses, and absolutely clarity of mission. Because what has stopped investment into renewables in the past has been a concern that the government's not going to stick with the programme. We have to make sure we stick with the programme and then work through the practicalities, and I look forward to doing that. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I think that's my part over and done with.